How does it look like at the end of the world? How are the people living at the end of the world? How is it traveling at the end of the world? Hello, creative companion. Today I will talk about my experiences traveling through New Zealand. I will talk about my travel preparations, my flights, jet lag, how I came from A to B, about my route, my impressions from New Zealand, accommodation, the weather, the food, how it was to travel through New Zealand alone, what I learned personally and what I take with me, and talk about the travel costs. During the talk I draw the Mount Taranki. For that I'm using a reference photo which I made in New Zealand. So let's start. I start with the travel preparation and the basics information about my journey. I spent 7 weeks in New Zealand in February and March of 2024. I started in Frankfurt am Main, Germany. I planned my trip 3 weeks before departure. Yes, it is possible, and then it is still possible to find reasonable flight prices. I know, most people plan such a long trip a year in advance. But you also need to know what your life will look like in a year, and I didn't know that. A year ago, I didn't know exactly when I'd be done with my master degree. I only knew that I was going to make another long trip at the end of my master degree, and had therefore started saving money early. I was hopping between Italy and New Zealand and I thought, I know what you're now thinking, both countries are very different. However, I found that the two nations have something in common. Volcanoes and both are active. In the end, I chose New Zealand because after days of searching, I had found an affordable flight. This was really funny because I told my friends I was going to travel to Italy, and then I booked New Zealand. After the booking I was, I will fly to New Zealand, by the way. And what's more, you can easily apply for a holiday visa online up to 72 hours before arrival. That's very handy. It was exciting to book the flights. I had really long researched, a few days, and then took all my courage to book the flight. And I'd never flown long distance before. I've never been so far away, and I've not been outside Europe, and have never experienced a major time difference. But I booked the flights, and then there was no return. Both flights had an intermediate stop in Asia. On the way through Seoul, South Korea, and on the way back through Shanghai, China. I didn't need a transit visa for both of them, and that was very handy. I had filled my backpack with summer, sporty, everyday clothes, rain trousers, and a rain jacket, and of course a sketchbook and materials to draw, and of course other practical items. I had already planned and booked my route from Germany, but in cancellation mode. I could still change my plans on the go if I wanted to. And 3 weeks later, a week after my colloquium, I started my observation on long-distance flights. If you are used to long bus trips, as me, a long-distance flight in the cheapest seat group will look like a 5-star hotel, so I survived the flights very well. Now the question, did I had a jet lag? On the way to Auckland, I was super tired, but I only went to sleep in the evening and could avoid such a jet lag. 12-hour time shift and no jet lag, that was really good. But back when I was in Germany, I had to struggle for the first 2 days to stay awake. There wasn't much going on with me, but it quickly got better. The next question. How did I get from A to B in New Zealand? I had gotten a flexi pass with a certain time contingent from the intercity buses for that. This is a long-distance bus company such as Flixbus or Eurolines in Europe. What I really appreciated about the FlexiPass was that you were able to cancel your ticket free of charge at the latest up to 2 hours before departure and get the time contingent back. Disadvantage: depending on the route, the bus does not go every day or only once a day, which makes changing sometimes a bit difficult. There are also no timetables where you can see all bus stops and departure times. I always had to find out individually in the system. Besides the intercity bus, there's also the Kiwi Experience bus. It is aimed exclusively at tourists, has more tourist destinations, and has a school class travel character and is much more expensive than the intercity. But the high price and the school class character have put me off. I have experienced intercity as very reliable, and in most cases it was also on time. But I quickly found out that New Zealand is more geared to individual traffic by car. Pedestrians' paths sometimes just stop in the middle of the route, and the cyclists are to share the highway with the cars and trucks. I love cycling, but in New Zealand I don't really recommend it. I was also very upset about myself that I haven't managed to handle my car fears so far, that they exist, and that other people don't seem to have a problem with driving a car. I know you shouldn't compare yourself to other people, but that's very hard. Above all, I was upset about myself because I had a driver license. Honestly, I don't know how I did it, but after the exam, I developed a car fear. I'm not afraid of left-hand traffic either. I'm basically afraid only of other cars on the road. Because I have to admit, even if a car is expensive in New Zealand, it really is worth it. That's why I want to come back one day, but then drive around New Zealand by car. So, let's start saving money again. My first plan was to stay only on the North Island, as the buses on the South Island run less often. And after my research, the South Island can be explored better by car. In the middle of my trip, I changed my travel route totally, because I have noticed that everything I can do on foot, I do in 2 days. and I've spent around 4 days in one place so far. I only met people in hostels by car, and hitchhiking was not an option for me. So this was my final travel route. Auckland, Paia, Wangara, Rotorua, Taupo, the place where I changed travel plans, Taranki, Wellington, Nelson, Greymouth, Christchurch, Kaikoura, and back to Wellington, to New Plymouth, day trip to Hamilton, and then back to Auckland. I saw many things and I had a good mix between relaxed traveling and fast traveling. Let's talk about accommodations. I've been sleeping in hostels all the time. On my first trip I had also planned an Airbnb and a single room, but this was no longer affordable to the changes. So I lived in hostels for 7 weeks. I took everything from the double room to the 12-bed dorm. I had everything from women's rooms to mixed rooms. Every hostel featured a kitchen, and most of them also included coin-operated washing machines. In general, the North Island hostels were more elegant and up-to-date than the South Islands. In the South Island, however, there was no such great choice anymore. The impression may also have arisen from the fact that a lot was already booked after I had changed my travel route. Prices have also varied greatly. Hostels in Wellington, Christchurch and Auckland, so the big cities, were often a little more expensive. I have been able to meet many different people and new life perspectives. Many travelers were from Germany, France, the UK, Belgium and the Netherlands. I also met Japanese, but above all, Germans were to be met in every hostel. They were everywhere. Let's say they were everywhere. I mean, I'm one of them, so I can't judge, I guess. I also had the fear of meeting only 19-year fresh graduated school kids from Germany because it's a German thing, and that was not the case. I have met people of all ages, and that was very interesting. Let's talk about the weather. My expectations of the weather and the reality were very different. I had read in advance that the weather should be very variable, it should rain more often than expected, and the rain should be very strong, and it should change very quickly. In my ears it sounds like Irish weather, but I've never experienced anything like Irish weather in New Zealand, being honest. The weather was great. The sun's rays are really intense. You should use sunscreen. In the 7 weeks, the weather was very nice and I was able to see many beautiful clouds. For cloud lovers, New Zealand is the right place to be. So let's talk about another very important topic. Food. I cook mostly by myself in the hostel because it's just cheaper. It was best for me to shop at large pack and save stores. The food, depending on what, is a little more expensive than in Germany, but since everything in Germany has also become very expensive, the supply was limited. The vegetables and fruits were very aromatic and tasted good. Kiwis are mostly imported from Italy.
That was strange.
A second common ground between Italy and New Zealand. The choice of bread was rather modest. I can't talk about meat, I'm a vegetarian. And they like to sell XXL packages, for example 1 liter of yogurt or 1 kilogram of cheese. Which makes sense if you live there, but as a traveler it is a bit unpractical. So I mean the big packages are also much more cheaper than the small ones. I mean there are some small ones, but they are more expensive, so... Let's get to my overall impression of New Zealand. There are echoes of New Zealand's breathtaking beauty all around Germany. But I remember thinking, oh yeah, this is supposed to be beautiful New Zealand when I first landed in Auckland. However, I had the chance to truly explore surreal landscapes after I traveled a bit farther outside of the city and saw more. It was lovely. I loved the forest in the north of the North Island. I also had the feeling of walking through a huge botanical garden. At the same time, the temperature was super pleasant and the humidity was not too high. The air was just perfect for hiking and I really loved hiking there. The jungle-like plant world impressed me very much and I fell in love with the black thorn trees there. I also think highly of New Zealand's hiking paths. The majority of them are in excellent shape, which makes the hike easy and enjoyable. Furthermore, each major parking lot and bus stop had a clean restroom. It greatly impressed me because in Germany, it's that people trash and damage public restrooms as soon as they are available for use. I always wonder what's going wrong in Germany or what the people are thinking. But almost every major attraction in New Zealand had a parking lot from which you had only a few meters to the attraction. For example, the sightseeing waterfall, but there was also a longer high path there. This meant that there were always a lot of people near the attraction with parking, but you barely walked the hiking path there 3 meters further and you had your peace again. Besides the plant world, I have also learned to love the bird world. I became a real bird fan and I was able to discover many birds in the wild. I was impressed by the geothermal craters and pools around Rotorua and Taupo. Also, there are warm rivers where you could swim, and it's totally natural. I was simply very impressed to see what nature has created all of itself without humans. I had never seen so much volcanic activity before. Before I traveled to New Zealand, I didn't even realize there was so much there. That was a nice surprise. Furthermore, I was also very impressed that I often had cool sea bays for myself. I often went to very little places where I had never met a human soul. At first I wondered if there was anything poisoned here, or why nobody was here. But it's simple, because there are so few people on the island that the whole thing is pretty well spread out. How was it to travel through New Zealand by myself? Great! I felt safe going through it and easily made new acquaintances through my hostel stays. Since I traveled with the Intercity and there are not too many hostels in New Zealand, the likelihood of meeting previous travel acquaintances is quite high. The travel community is great, and I have also experienced the cliché hostel life there. I've never had such experiences in Europe. And what did I personally learn on this trip? It is important to work on a fear. I'm going to have to get my car fear in control. I don't know how yet, but I want to do it. During the travel I really often got angry about myself and had to learn to cope with my own berries. I have learned many new species of plants and animals. I have seen places in nature that acted on me like movie scenes. I have learned about volcanic activities and many different perspectives on life, which makes travel so valuable. You take a few steps out of your own life, you get to know other things. It starts small, for example, a different doorknob when you eat other food or the life structures or the infrastructures, and you learn to appreciate completely different things again. This has increased my gratitude for available public transport systems, as well as the pathways for bicyclists and pedestrians. I also learned that there are countries where it's normal to have so much space, and that it could be normal to live alone, or to have long distance to the closest acquaintances. I've learned how it feels to stand next to geothermal pools and how they smell, to see dolphins swimming freely in the sea. There are places where you can see the stars so well, and of course I learned something about the Maori culture, politics, history and lifestyle of New Zealand. I could fill the list endlessly, and it makes travel so incredibly valuable. All the things you learn about your environment that you never thought of, and that you get to know yourself really well again. And yeah, what do I take with me from the trip? There are many impressions, wishes, ideas and fascination for nature. I would like to go back there for a second trip for 8 or 10 weeks, but then with the ability and confidence to be able to drive a car. I'd also be happy if I could start the whole thing early enough to ask friends if they'd like to come with me. I would also like to gain more experience with kayaking and try a hut-to-hut hike, to gain experience and see if I like it at all. Furthermore, the desire has developed to have a sketchbook for every continent. It would be nice if, at the end of my life, I could say that I painted the whole world. I also had the crazy thought during a hike that if one day I could live for my art, I would hike the Te Aroa Trail for you. This trail spans 3,000 kilometers across New Zealand. I also want to develop my painting skills of landscape watercolor drawings. I have been very disturbed by this, and I still have to practice. In short, I have found out that I still have a lot to learn. So, now let's talk about the price I paid. Without the flights, the 7 weeks costed me €1,999.91. Funny number, I know. But that is the real number. That are about 624 New Zealand dollars, 2,130 US dollars, and about 1,076 pounds. About 304 euros I spent for excursions, around 1,278 euros for accommodations, and 268 euros for food. But I ate 5 weeks rice with vegetables and cooked by myself. Yes, I'm a saving fox. The bus cost me around 328 euros. Totally, with the flights I paid 3,025 euros and 55 cents. That are about 6,679 New Zealand dollars, 3,968 US dollars, and 3,170 pounds. The biggest amount I spent on the flights, but it makes sense. I was flying around half of the world. They have to pay the machines and employees, and they bring me safe back, so I think it was worth it. I also think that the whole travel was really worth it, even if it was expensive. So this was it for today. If you liked my draw and talk, then please leave a like. Stay creative and I see you next time. Bye!